All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I'm so excited. We're going to welcome Aleasha Bahr to the show. She is a sales strategist, a speaker, a best-selling author, a founder of a sales method called the Black Sheep Sales Method. We're going to dive into some of that today. And she has just 15 years customizing sales strategies. And she does that based on your personality, the audience, the service, and really just knowing your audience, which we all talk about in theory, but is harder to do than we think it is. So I'm excited to lean in and learn a little about using sales as market research, essentially. So welcome to the podcast, Aleasha.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. I'm very excited to be here.
Good. Well, we're so glad you could join us. For quick background, this podcast tends to be heard by both existing CMOs who kind of want to sharpen their axe with new tricks and tips. And every CMO out there in the world, whether they say it or not, are either struggling or working to master sales and marketing alignment. So anything that marketers can learn about how sellers think and operate is super valuable. So that's why we love having you here today. We love having a voice of the seller on the line. Or we have an audience who is maybe wants to be a CMO and is sort of thinking this world of CMO is brands and board meetings and all the good things. The reality is it's aligning with sales. Like at the end of the day, like we need to be able to a CMO proves their value in how much revenue they're helping to contribute. And so this sales relationship is super important. So thrilled to have you here to talk about that. So let's start. Tell me about your career journey in 3 sentences, like if you can do that. How did you get here?
Yes. So I started selling digital marketing in corporate for a long time. And I have my own marketing agency. And I have since then just focused on sales strategy. So evolved, I sold about almost 15 million in professional services. And I have put a definition to my method and empowered other people to sell tens of millions in turn.
Awesome. It's the first time, just for total candor, that's the first time I've asked a question in that way about like tied to 3 sentences. And it was fun to watch because usually that's like a 15-minute answer of like, well, I started back in the 80s doing whatever. And I love it. I can see you choosing your words. Like, was that a period? Okay, I've got my second sentence, my third sentence, being super deliberate. So I love the question. I think it gets to the heart super quick. So thanks for using that. I do wonder, as you said that, you mentioned about that you were selling digital marketing. So you both sides of that. You sold to a marketing, but you were a seller of doing that. So what made you out of that say, you know what, I want to really focus on better sales strategies?
Well, first I focused on marketing. I had my own marketing agency. So I was like, okay, well, I'm tired. The problem with corporate is a lot of times they don't fulfill on client results. So I was like, I'm going to do this better, right? And it's really hard to have an agency. And I realized that there was a massive lack of sales training that didn't feel aggressive and cringy. So for the regular person, that's really hard to implement, that kind of manipulation forward sales strategy. So I was always a natural at sales, and anybody who's a natural at sales never had a reason to put words to their strategy. So over the last few years, I have been able to put words to a strategy that other people have done. They just have never put it in writing.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I listen to some sales tip like podcasts, and I love them because they are like quick, pithy, like, they realize that the attention span potentially of a seller is sort of short and concise. Like, what do I need to do? How quick do I need to do it? What is the action? What's very tactical? What can I take away from this? And so I love listening to this. Those podcasts are like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, enough to be like, oh man, that's a great tip. Oh, that's a great tip. Oh, this is how I work an event. Oh, this is how I work a trade show. Oh, this is how I work a first call. So really interesting. So in that intro, I said something about you using sales as market research.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Sales is really the front lines of your marketing. It's so important when you talk about like marketing and sales being aligned. I recruit, hire, and train salespeople and build teams, and am often the middleman between those two things. And since I've been in the sales position and the marketing position, it's really helpful to have that experience, because whatever salespeople are hearing as a common objection is something that needs to be created as marketing content. Or if they notice that prospects are coming in with a certain kind of misconception about the industry or idea about what they do, that can be applied to the messaging that's on the website or the messaging that the prospect sees before the conversation. If there can be patterns identified in the people who say yes, and then patterns identified in the people who say no, then you can use that to craft the language and the content topics that you're focusing on. For example, a big one that I'm sure you see all the time is people will be like, here's a swipe file, like here's this easy cheat sheet and blah, 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 which is really for a DIY audience, do-it-yourself audience. And they are selling a done-for-you service. So that's a good example of like just when it's just misaligned without really meaning for it to be.
Interesting. Wow. So how does that work though? So what does that feedback loop look like? How would you encourage sellers to feel empowered to get that feedback back to either their marketing teams or potentially the product teams or the product marketing teams as they think about this feedback they're hearing, whether it's a pain point or a buyer behavior, whether it's a positioning of the product, whether it's a missing feature, like what are all those things? What's the channel to get that back? Because I feel like sellers are probably driving to sell revenue. Is there a good way to get that feedback out of them?
I think it's really helpful to have a meeting once a week with marketing and sales and to have structured questions, like a structured agenda for that meeting. So what patterns are you seeing in the prospects this week? What are you hearing? Anything unusual? Is it just the normal stuff? And all the sellers can kind of chip in and say what they're hearing, and marketing can say, okay, it sounds like we should maybe create some content around this. Do you think that would be valuable? What if we create this content to send to your prospect before the call? Or what if we create this content for you to send after the call? Would that address that? And really kind of collaboratively come up with the solutions together.
Oh yeah, I like that. I think that's great. I think we have a Slack channel that's kind of, I think it's called like a marketing feedback or product feedback. Maybe we have two different ones that sellers can give like feedback in, either things like, hey, I've had a customer asking when we're going to have this feature on the roadmap, or I've had a customer saying that they want to use this, but they really want to use this for this use case. And it's kind of starting to trigger a little bit, but having that forced function that gets that information into the hands of marketers and hopefully product people both is pretty powerful. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, the issue, you kind of pointed to it, like sellers are moving fast. So you have to prompt them with questions. They're not very good at just giving you information. And it also is a learned skill to understand when a seller is just being lazy and complaining, or when they're giving something that's like meaty that you should take action on. So if multiple sellers are saying the same thing, that's a good sign. But generally, that having some questions that you prompt them with in the moment is going to get the best answers.
Gotcha. Okay. I love that. Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
So when you talk about sales strategies, you're talking about like one idea you talked about was the sales as market research, but other part I assume is a little bit on the softer side. It's going to be things around like, how do you show empathy for customers? How does a seller, use their listing skills or curiosity skills or anything to sort of unpack customer needs or behaviors or need states or any of that? How do you do that? How do you coach a seller on that?
Yeah. So with the black sheep sales philosophy, the principles of it, all you need to really be successful is empathy, curiosity, and passion.
Okay.
And that's because it is so rare for someone to feel seen and heard in this world. And if you can give them that in a sales conversation, it's really powerful because most people are just selling, just trying to get the credit card. And they'll be talking to a prospect and the prospect will share their, bloody story that just happened. They have a problem, right? They're upset. Like, because, everything's just been a mess since then and it's been really rough. And this person said they were going to deliver and they didn't. And this person. And then the salesperson will be like, and how long have you been dealing with that? And it's like, they just told you like this horrible story. Can you acknowledge that that's really frustrating to experience that and how easy it is to give up and how they're not giving up? And you're so glad that they're talking to you so that you can help them. That's going to make somebody so much more receptive to the question or the thing that you're saying after it.
Yeah. I should practice that with my husband better. Sort of like, instead of saving up my question to ask, I should listen and be more empathetic. We'd probably be all better off that way in every conversation. So I love it. So tell me about where black sheep, where does that come from? And where did that name come from? Like, what was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. So the inspiration was it's been an evolution, as you know, being in marketing, to figure out what made me stand out to the people that I wanted to stand out to. So I started with, the secret art of subtle selling, which is like, not really hitting it, right? Then selling for introverts, but a lot of people don't know that they're introverts. So that didn't work. Then it was the matchmaker sales method, which kind of just sounds like little old ladies. And
those little ladies from Moana or whatever, or what is, no, it's anyway, gosh, I can't believe, anyway, it's the one with Disney movies, Mulan, when they go off and matchmaker ladies.
Yes, exactly. So, because the whole philosophy of black sheep sales is it's about fitting, not selling, fitting somebody to your solution. So I've always been, I know I look like a suburban mom, but I've always been a black sheep in about every way that you can imagine. And that feeling of just like as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, as, a salesperson, and that feeling that people experience where they're like, it's kind of upsetting people that I'm not doing it the way that they are doing it for some reason. And I had this conversation with a client about how I was the black sheep in my family. Entrepreneurs often are like, you're a weirdo for not taking the safe route. And they were like, yeah, me too. And then I talked to the second client that week and they were like, me too. And same with the third client. And I was like, wait a second, maybe this is it. This person who's just like, there's got to be another way to do it, because the mainstream way to do sales is so unaligned for most people. The irony is that a black sheep salesperson is just like a good person, like not an annoying douchebag, basically. So it's just, I love being able to give people that permission to lean into, to resist what people say that they should do just because that's the way it's done, which is, in marketing, like in any business, the kiss of death, like,
right. Yeah, you're not gonna. Yeah, I love that. And that's interesting. Like the black sheep feels like it's like sort of the odd one out, but you realize it's actually more common than not, which is, because everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody knows what the annoying douchebag sales, to use your word, salesman looks like, or salesperson looks like. And to think, I don't actually want to be that. I want to be something a little bit different. I don't know exactly how to do that. Like always be closing. Like, is that annoying? Is that, how do I fit in there? So I love that that you kind of said, hey, there's actually maybe a different way to do that.
Yes.
You mentioned in there that, you've been the black sheep, you're a woman, a seller, an entrepreneur, all the good things. Do you think women bring a different strength to the black sheep method or to sales in general? And have you witnessed that?
Absolutely. Women are fantastic salespeople. I love working with a woman. Statistically speaking, data shows that people trust women more, just like by default, unconscious bias, basically. But also, women are incredible listeners. And they're typically very good at empathy, because of the way we just are raised, basically, is like thinking of others. Is everyone okay? And like, don't do that to somebody else. Don't put them in that position. So it's really easy for them to do that in the sales conversation too. And those are powerful skills for moving sales forward. Most of the time, the saleswomen are outselling the guys on teams.
Because of the positioning of your black sheep approach and that model of the story, way you explained it, are most of your customers women, or do you get both?
I get both, because there's a lot of guys who are like, I don't like this aggressive thing that they say that I have to do. And I'm not that guy. I don't want to be that guy. And so this alternative is really like, thank God there's another option. Everybody's just like, this can't be the only way. And it's like, guess what? It's not. And when women try to act aggressive like that, which sometimes they do, it a lot of times doesn't work well. So I have this theory that for the longest time, the only people selling were aggressive men selling to other aggressive men. And so it worked really well. But now there's all kinds of buyers and sellers. So like if you sell really aggressively like that to a woman or a guy who's not aggressive, it's not gonna work well.
Yep.
And when a woman or a guy who's not aggressive tries to sell like that, it doesn't work well. So then you add in like different socioeconomic backgrounds and like cultures, and it really depends on the personality. And it's a minority of people who are like that. And so when women, I would say if women lean into their natural strengths, they're better at sales. But if they force themselves to act like that, maybe not as much.
Yeah. I think that's true across the board, even outside of selling. I see that in marketing. I see that in all kinds of careers. You see that in books. I read a book about women in leadership roles, and it basically was like, there's not enough women at the leadership table. So if you want to get a seat up there, essentially start acting like a man. It's like, okay, what's the point of being there if like you want more women on leadership because they bring this unique strength of EQ or listening or empathy or any of these things. So to kind of neuter yourself to get there defeats the purpose of getting there in the first place, because you're not bringing that unique value.
Totally agree. It's about multiple perspectives. I'm not saying it should be all women, but I'm not saying it should be like, it just shouldn't be all men. It should be both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hear this mindset sometimes people talk about sellers. We talk about it a lot, even at Demand Base, because of, we look at our sellers and we say, okay, what's the profile that we want? Do we want more relationship driven people? Do we want more performance minded people? Do we want people who are sort of marching against like SLAs and X number of calls per day and X number, like who sort of are data driven? And not that correlates directly to what you're talking about as sort of the aggressive go-getter versus maybe more of the softer touch listener. But do you think there's a balance that works, that one alone is not enough, that you actually need a mix of the two? Or do you feel like the more of the black sheep method actually will become over the long term a more performance-oriented culture or driver?
I mean, the black sheep sales method really applies to all industries, all products, all services. It's just treating a human like a human and uncovering what's in their best interests, even if that's not your service or product. That being said, so I don't believe that sales is a numbers game in the way that people mean it, where it's like, just contact as many people as possible and someone's going to say something. The only time that is really effective is if it's a huge company that's going for sheer volume numbers. The majority of companies aren't trying to do that.
Yeah.
So they're actually hurting their success by doing that. It's like volume is sort of a lazy excuse for a lack of strategy. Just be strategic and intentional in your outreach, and you will have a much higher response rate. And especially if those are clients that are going to be long-term, that you have relationships with. Because if you're just like anyone with a pulse and a credit card, that's a really quick way to have nightmare clients. And anybody who's had nightmare clients knows they drain way more time and energy than the money that they pay you. So I think that there needs to be a drive there for every salesperson. They need to be hungry for sure, but they need to be able to see people as people.
Yeah. Maybe that's the passion component on top of empathy and curiosity. That's the drive. And then you've got the empathy and curiosity on the kind of the human element, the seeking to learn, the listening. So I love those attributes. I think that's great. Okay. And it actually parallels pretty good to, I think, the way marketing is kind of evolving, right? So as a marketer, we're moving from like the old days of kind of like, we didn't have any insights, we didn't have any data, we didn't know who was in the market for us. So we sort of sprayed the market and hope that like somebody would bite, right? Same idea of like, we're just going to call as many people as we can today and hope somebody picks up. And we realized in marketing, right? Like we don't have resources, dollars, headcount to do that. Instead, let's go find the people who are showing the right intent or behaviors that says this person's probably in the market for my product. Then I'm going to go reach out to them and really focusing our marketing efforts more strategically, not a volume game. So I think there's some parallels a lot between marketing and sales, which actually drives me to kind of my next question, thinking about what do you think for marketing to be most effective? What do you think the most important questions are that we should ask sales to really get that meaningful data about prospects and customers? Like you mentioned, they need a prompt. They need like some start? Like, what is that question that says, what have you heard from a customer lately? Or is it very specific kind of prompts we should ask?
Yeah, I think, when I get the best feedback is what patterns do you see in people who are not moving forward?
Mm.
And you might have to dig some more for that because obviously we're looking for something beyond they don't have money, and what are the patterns you see in the people who say yes? What do they have certain assets in place? Have they tried certain things and are frustrated with them? Are they in the beginning of their journey? Are they people who are more integrity and values driven? Are they people that are more numbers driven? So you can prompt them with those more specific details too to get them to really think. And then I don't know if there's an account management team. I always like to ask what patterns there are in clients who are really happy with results and what patterns are there in clients who are not getting results. And the same kind of questions, because a lot of times people are being sold something incorrectly. And it's actually really magnetic when you can tell somebody, hey, you don't have this and that in place. So you're not actually, this isn't the thing for you right now. You should go do this other thing first. They will come back. They will tell people about you. I mean, it's very powerful and increases sales. So when you know what that criteria kind of is for what makes somebody not get results or not like your stuff, it helps to really hone in on the marketing strategy and sales strategy being aligned in that way.
I like that. I mean, and there's all kinds of data about how much marketing and sellers are not aligned, right? I think it's like 48% of companies would say that their sales and marketing departments are aligned. Or maybe it's the opposite, aren't aligned. Maybe it's 52% that are, but somewhere in there, about half the market. And which means that like there's half the companies out there where sales and marketing are not aligned, and sharing these insights, these sort of sales insights or customer insights as market research from sellers back to marketers seems like an immediate way to start to drive alignment, to start to build trust, to build those relationships between your marketers and sellers in a really powerful way. Maybe you've seen that. Is that a common behavior?
Absolutely, especially when you can collaboratively come up with the solution. So like, okay, it sounds like we need a video that's going to address how video is a better option than just text something, because that's what they're confused about all the time. Or maybe if the objection is that it's time consuming, let's really focus on how it's, how this streamlines things so that it makes the sale. Would that make the sales conversation easier for you if we had that, And so that kind of collaborative working together really helps. And then letting people never tell a salesperson like, no, we're not going to do that. Just be like, okay, yeah, we'll put that on the list for like later. We want to focus on the things that are going to make the biggest impact now. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing that I see that is missing is marketing's like, I'm just getting leads. Okay. That's all I care about. I'm getting leads. And sales is like, I want quality leads. I don't want just someone who fills out an email. So it's like, hey, sales, what's a quality lead for you? What would you like to know that would make that person someone you are very excited to talk to? And it can't just be that they have money, right? These other things about them. So you can sort of together reverse engineer how to get that person and maybe even confirm that it is that person. Maybe like in the form that they fill out, you can ask a question, how big is your team? I don't want to talk to solopreneurs. They need to have at least 10 people on their team or, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. And that's a good way. Like we did when I was at my last company, I did a listening tour with all of our sellers. I went to anyone who had open leads that had not progressed, like open pipeline opportunities that had not progressed to the next stage for like over 90 days or something. And I would sit down and I'd be like, why is this one stalled? Why is this one stalled? And you asked, I think the first thing you said is, what's the pattern of not moving forward? And literally went like line by line and be like, okay, you've got 14 open ops that haven't moved. Why? And we went through each one. And the theme that emerged across all of them turned out to be timing. It was all like, hey, this is really important. It fits our needs state. It fits a use case we want to solve. It solves a pain point that we have. We have the budget for it. We have all the things. But timing isn't right. We're not ready to make this decision for 6 more months, 9 more months, 12 more months. And what we realized is that we weren't qualifying for the T in the band. We were on ban. And so we didn't hit the T during our qualification process. So things are making it to pipeline that weren't actually ready, that probably should have been nurtured maybe one stage earlier. But it took like just sitting down with sellers and giving them a forum to hear their feedback, to actually be like, oh, this is why. So they haven't closed the ops because they know that it's a good op. So the quality is there, but missing one of the qualification criteria. And again, it was such a thing for us, is that, oh, well, let's change, because we have the SDRs working for marketing. Let's change the way that the SDRs are qualifying pipeline against all of the criteria, including timing. And then what ended up happening is we had a little reduction in how many things made it to pipeline because of that. But the conversion rate then of pipe to close one was much higher. And so the efficiency was better. And you're right. Then it's not a numbers game. It's about the highest quality and placing our bets in the right places. So I love your story, because I think or your approach, because I think it actually literally backs into the way we had to figure out how to solve it on our end.
I love that. And I mean, it is important to address that there's sometimes an issue that there's a difference between salespeople and sales strategists. Like they're different skill sets. And it sounds like you were almost acting like a sales strategist in that moment when you identified both. Yeah, that's right. But a lot of marketing people aren't sales strategists either. So like understanding that there is a skill set that could be missing, and like, don't be so hard on yourselves about it, or hard on the salespeople for not knowing what to say about it. Because a lot of salespeople think empathy is honestly like a skill that would save the world. Like there would be like less wars and like crime and stuff.
Less political debates on social media and
oh my gosh, yes. But having empathy for salespeople, they're just hired and thrown into this. Like they hire 10 and are like, 2 will stick. See who figures it out. Have fun. Like no direction. They have to come up with their own strategy, their own collateral. And that's really hard and frustrating. So being able to like have empathy for that situation, and you know, that like they've been tasked with coming up with their own stuff, basically. Just nuts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we look at it with SDRs. I mean, we're hiring them straight out of college. So this is their first job, first learning experience, first chance to hear it. And yeah, I mean, I think if we recognize, to your point on empathy, if we recognize that no one's out to prove that the other function is bad, everyone's trying to win, right? We all want our bonuses. We all want the company to grow. We all want to keep our jobs, like, which means we should perform. Like, it means that we all need revenue. So if we all know that we're all aligned to revenue, and therefore by correlation pipeline, then we should want to help each other out in both ways. So I think it's great, and to kind of show that empathy that like, hey, we know sellers are all trying as hard as possible. They want to be successful just like we do. So I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there any one, this will be my last question before we start to wrap up, but is there any one champion that you've noticed in the sales organization that is good at driving this type of behavior? Is it a sales leader, like a CSO? Is it like the star sales guy that everybody sort of looks to? Every company has one. We all know who that guy is. He's kind of the one we put on, to pilot new decks and stuff because they're such a stud. Or is it like RevOps? Like, who's the one who's sort of the champion for making sure behaviors like this happen?
Yeah. I mean, you bring up another really commonly accepted truth of sales that is pretty broken, which is a lot of people are promoting the top sales guy to manager, director. And managing people is a totally different skill set. And that sales guy is going to be pissed that he's like not selling and making as much money. And they're also going to not, like, the only way they can manage is say, this is how I do it. And that's not going to work for everybody. So having somebody who's actually good at people management is the best person to drive that forward. So not so much a title, because so often the wrong person is in the
that's true.
Yeah. It's really the person who everyone feels like safe around, that they can trust, that they can open up to. In theory, that should be the sales director. And the sales director and the CMO should be like talking all the time.
Yeah.
About what they're hearing from their people too, so that they can get aligned and on the same page. But it needs to be that culture that fosters bring it to me, and being able to filter out like, okay, that's just you complaining and not really something I have to consider. And this is something to grab onto.
Yeah. I love it. I think that makes a ton of sense. Awesome. Okay, so we will wrap up in a fun way real quick. Before we part, what's a fun fact about you that maybe people don't know or that this audience might find interesting?
Well, I've recently started doing, I do sketch comedy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I've been doing some Salesy Steve sketch comedy videos that you can see on LinkedIn.
Salesy Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm writing that down. I love it. Okay. So tell me about sketch comedy. Is that like improv? Like, do you often, or is it usually scripted, structured?
It's somewhat structured. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, I'll have a topic that's like, okay, Salesy Steve's going to take on objections. And this is what he says about objections. And I have someone who's really great at prompting me for more. So she's sort of like, okay, focus in more on that and this, and sort of like directing me, I guess, producing me.
Oh my gosh. Do you have like comedy chops in your background? Like, did you ever do improv or stand up or anything like that in your background?
I did do improv, never stand up. I'm not really like a punchline kind of gal,
Mm-hmm.
more storytelling.
Okay.
So I've always kind of liked it, just for fun. I used to want to be an actress, but then I realized it would be really hard to do that. And he said, no. So I just try to find these other outlets to kind of get my jollies, I guess.
Oh, I love it. I think that's fun. We used to go to improv all the time when I was like in Chicago. We'd go to like the Second City or like the Upright Citizens Brigade in New York. Like
That's the home. That's the epicenter. Yeah.
It's awesome. It was good stuff. So, well, wow. I can't wait to check out Salesy Steve. So that leads us to our very last question. If people want to learn more about you, other than Googling Salesy Steve and finding you, I assume on YouTube or TikTok or something, where else should they go to follow you?
Yeah. LinkedIn is where I am primarily. And I also have a podcast called Sales is Not a Dirty Word. If you want to check out how to sell like a natural, it's a great solo episode that kind of introduces my whole approach. And then I'm also publishing a book, Black Sheep Sales, How to Win More Sales Without Acting Like a Douchebag. And it will be available in January.
I love it. It's a great title. It's exactly what people want to buy. They're like, yes, that's the core. That's all I really want to know is how do I do this without being a douchebag?
Yeah.
So awesome. So you guys heard that. Follow her on LinkedIn, Salesy Steve. Podcast, Sales is Not a Dirty Word, standalone episode around how to sell like a natural. And we will be on the lookout for your book about the Black Sheep sales method. So thank you so much for being here today. I've loved the conversation.
Me too, Kelly. Thank you for having me and asking such great questions.
Of course. I'm sure that our listeners loved it. So thank you, listeners, for joining us. We will see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast.